Multicam. It's a term that clearly has the ability to spark heated debate amongst members of the military and among military enthusiasts. Although multi-environment patterns have been tested and proven to be effective, there are many who hate the fact that the multicam design and its variations are being adopted by so many countries around the world. So for today's video, we thought we would take a look at the concept of multicam, its origins at the now famous or infamous Crye precision, and why some people dislike it. So we really do enjoy discussing camouflage, thus it was both a relief and great joy to see people enjoying our recent videos covering Germany's Flecktarn and the Netherlands' relatively new fractal pattern. So many comments on these two YouTube videos discussed and debated multicam as it compares to other patterns used by militaries. Many were simply relieved that the Netherlands chose to go with something not based on the now very popular multicam. At the same time, there were many negative comments about Germany switching from its darker green Flecktarn to a brighter Multitarn. No, it's technically not multicam, but its design has the same purpose, a pattern for operating in multiple environments. We won't go through the history of multi-environment camouflage patterns, but we will start off with the story of Crye Precision and the development of their trademark Multicam, the first widely adopted multi-environment camouflage pattern. We should note here that throughout this video we will refer to Multicam in its most specific sense, the pattern developed by Crye Precision. Other patterns designed for more than one environment will be referred to as multi-environment patterns. And so, as explained by the Cooper Union, Crye Precision was a joint project between Caleb Crye and Greg Thompson. The two formed Crye Precision in 1999 as a quote-unquote nothing to lose spare time venture. After developing a new helmet for the Army, Crye Precision would expand into textile-based items, and this would lead to the eventual development of Multicam. The original Multicam developed by Crye Precision was introduced in the early 2000s and used by US Special Forces and Global Tactical Units. As explained on its official website, Multicam patterns take advantage of the way the human eye and brain perceive shape, volume, and color. Since only a very small portion of the human eye perceives color, the brain does a lot of filling in for the eye. The unique high-resolution design of Multicam takes advantage of this principle and helps the observer to see the pattern as part of the background. Fast forward a few years and the US Army decided to develop a multi-terrain pattern of its own. You know, something to replace the universally disliked and universally ineffective Universal Camouflage Pattern, or UCP. It's still crazy to think that this pattern was not field-tested before getting approved by the US Army. But anyway, on July 31st, 2014, the US Army formally announced that a design based on the pattern known as Scorpion W2 had been chosen as the new Operational Camouflage Pattern, or OCP. While OCP is not a fully original Crye Precision creation, there is a connection. Indeed, the original Scorpion pattern was developed through a joint venture between the Army's Natick Labs and Crye Precision. While Multicam and OCP look similar, OCP features a lighter palette with more horizontal flow, while Multicam has sharper edges and a broader tonal range for more universal terrain concealment. Over the past decade or so, the multi-environment pattern trend has really taken off. There are two good reasons for this. At the higher level is cost consideration. Some militaries have or had continued to send troops to arid regions in Africa and the Middle East. Thus, it made financial sense to have one design instead of having to produce gear and garments in two versions, one for woodlands and forests in northern latitudes and another lighter set for arid desert regions. At the more tactical level, it should be apparent that not everything in Europe and North America is dense forest suitable for the dark greens of many uniforms. Indeed, you have grasslands and urban areas to consider as well. Additionally, changing seasons mean that some green woodlands become a somewhat different environment come autumn. If a pattern can be useful in multiple environments and save taxpayer funds, well, then it should be an easy call for any Ministry of Defense to make. The influence of Crye Precision's Multicam on militaries around the world cannot be understated. Now, this may not be a comprehensive list, but we know of quite a few militaries that have switched to a Multicam-esque pattern with a connection to the work of Crye Precision. In 2011, it was announced that the Danish Defence Forces would be changing its existing M84 pattern to Multicam. The Australian Defence Forces AMCU camouflage pattern design, introduced in the 2010s, is licensed from Crye Precision. The multi-terrain pattern, or MTP, of the British Armed Forces was designed by Crye Precision, with the UK's Ministry of Defence holding the licence to print the pattern. In 2020, it was announced that the UK's Royal Marines would use Crye's Multicam as their pattern rather than MTP. During our trip to Estonia to see British forces in action, we learned that some soldiers had opted to buy their own jackets to suit their personal preferences, and that these jackets were in fact Multicam pattern. Apparently, this has been deemed acceptable simply because it looks close enough to MTP. But moving on, for the New Zealand Defence Forces, their multi-terrain pattern, or NZMTP, is derived from the British MTP and is thus loosely connected to the work of Crye Precision. In 2022, Belgium joined Denmark and the UK's Royal Marines in adopting Crye's Multicam, leaving lovers of the old jigsaw pattern heartbroken. Over in Ireland, the Irish Defence Forces' latest combat uniforms have been designed by, you guessed it, Crye Precision. It's known as Irish Transitional Multicam Pattern, or ITMP. And so it looks like at least 7 countries have camouflage patterns that are either Crye Precision's Multicam, a derivative of Multicam, or a pattern developed in partnership with the American company. But the trend of multi-environment camo goes beyond Crye Precision Multicam and its derivatives. The Canadians now have their CADPAT multi-terrain, the French have their BME multi-environment uniform camouflage pattern, and the Slovenians have SlowCam. Speaking about Czechia's MAD 21 pattern, the chief of the Czech Armed Forces Equipment Service states that the existing Czech Army forest pattern was modified using colors based on Multicam camouflage prints and modified for different anticipated environments. As it relates to this YouTube channel's main theme, Lithuania is the only Baltic nation out of the 3 that currently have a multi-terrain pattern. Latvia did have a multi-environment pattern, but switched to its fractal wood-lat-pat in the early 2020s. We could go on and on and on, but you get the point. The trend of adopting multi-terrain patterns is widespread. So, why do so many people hate the fact that their own militaries are adopting a type of pattern that, in many cases, has been proven to be effective? Well, if you're one of those haters, you'll already know some or all of the reasons. Here's what we've heard thus far. 1. It's simply too bright for dense forest. 2. It takes away a military's national identity and distinctiveness, particularly on multinational missions. 3. On the topic of distinctiveness, it makes it difficult to identify friend from foe, with some non-allied forces adopting similar patterns. With this point, we need to only look at the conflict in Ukraine, with the 2 sides needing to wear colored armbands. Such armbands, of course, are counterproductive as they stand out so clearly. We totally understand point number 2. It's a sentiment that isn't purely directed at the design of Multicam, but rather its ubiquitousness, where there was once more diversity. After all, if many countries started doing away with their unique patterns to adopt a similar-looking digital pattern, then you would hear similar complaints about losing national identity. Germans are very attached to their Flecktarn. Some Aussies were quite attached to their Ozcam jelly bean camo. Here in the Baltics, many Lithuanian service members prefer the old MO5 Mishko pattern to the new Universal pattern. A unique design continues to be a source of pride for service members representing their country. We can imagine this sentiment is strong among the Norwegians, Swedes, and Finns and their respective patterns. National identity is actually one reason stated by the Dutch for developing its fractal pattern. The exact quote from a specialist, translated from Dutch, states, "As Dutch armed forces, we want to make ourselves known as such abroad. That is why NFP was developed, a unique pattern." Funny enough, Multicam was used by the Dutch military as an interim uniform to bridge the gap between its old woodland pattern and NFP. And then point number 3, which is somewhat related to number 2, is also quite fair. But when it comes to point number 1 and its effectiveness in forest, we have to consider the fact that darker forest is just one environment of many, even within the same region. As stated by the website Czech Defense in discussing the adoption of the new pattern, when the landscape is more complicated, a good forest camouflage starts to lose its covering ability, not to mention urban development in general. Indeed, good forest camo simply stands out as being too dark in urban environments, grasslands, or places with less vegetation. It should go without saying that a pattern is only as good as its ability to match the environment it's being used in. You might think this pink camo is useless, but we were essentially undetected at the recent Pink Soup Festival in Vilnius. All jokes aside, we can see from this footage from a recent trip to Estonia that dark woodland forest is just one setting amongst many in the country. Ultimately, if a multi-environment pattern was field-tested, then there is a good reason for its adoption. It simply works as it's supposed to. At the same time, however, it is sad when distinct patterns are simply abandoned in favor of something used by many other nations. But what do you think of this multicam or multi-environment pattern trend? If you're firmly against it, can you at least see the reasons why militaries are adopting it? Let us know your thoughts by leaving a comment.